Is your university spying on you? At least one DC school admitted to it. We'll discuss this, a sociology course policy requiring white and male students to shut up and let minorities and women participate before they can engage in class discussion, inspired by who else but murderous communist dictator Mao Zedong, a student group calling for a boycott on classes about Israel, and our woke tweet of the week by Nicole Hannah-Jones calling out Al Sharpton of all people. I'm Peter Cordy, and you're watching Campus Countdown. In our number 3 story of the week, don't take Zionist classes, warned a pro-Palestine group at the University of Chicago the day before Holocaust Remembrance Day in an Instagram post. The group called for their peers to boycott any classes, quote, on Israel or those taught by Israeli fellows, stating that by attending these classes, you are participating in a propaganda campaign that creates complicity in the continuation of Israel's occupation of Palestine. Boycott these classes that serve as vehicles to spread Zionist propaganda on American college campuses. If you or anyone you know are taking these courses, drop them. An account called Jewish on Campus responded to the anti-Israel post, saying that blocking conversation blocks peace. We should be having conversations, not shutting them down. Other commenters chimed in, including one user who wrote that the student group is, quote, using boycotts to try to push through their agenda, and said, if you disagree with the professor, raise an objection. In fact, I would encourage everyone to take these classes and ask hard questions. That's why you came to this school. Another Instagram user wrote, boycotting classes related to an entire country is not the solution. It only perpetuates a cycle of ignorance and hate. Well said. And in case you were wondering how much Zionist propaganda there is on college campuses, the answer is not much, as American college campuses are some of the most hostile environments for Jewish students and faculty in the country. In 2021 alone, there were 244 anti-Semitic attacks reported on college campuses, a number that has been rising despite there being less students on campus due to COVID restrictions. The Heritage Foundation also released a study on the Twitter feeds of university staffers and diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, finding that 96% of those university employees expressed a negative opinion of Israel. 96%! While by comparison, 62% expressed a positive opinion on China, a country committing actual genocide as we speak. The Brandeis Center also released a poll showing that 65% of Jewish students felt unsafe on campus, leading to 50% actually hiding their Jewish identity at the school. Even the simple act of condemning anti-Semitism creates a frenzy of hatred and outrage from the pro-Palestine community on campus, in one case resulting in a Rutgers University chancellor actually apologizing for condemning anti-Jewish attacks. We spoke to the founder of the Brandeis Center, Kenneth Marcus, in a recent interview, and he told us that this anti-Israel rhetoric on campus gets taken to the extreme of resulting in widespread anti-Semitism in higher education, especially in DEI programs. Regardless of the merits, or the lack of merit in their geopolitical agenda, these pro-Palestine groups, like the one at the University of Chicago, take it way too far, spreading nothing but hatred and division. It's one thing to have a dialogue about the Israel-Palestine conflict, but it's another to demonize anyone affiliated with Israel or of Jewish ancestry, as we see on campus and around the country. Moving on to our second story of the week, George Washington University has admitted to tracking student and employee locations on campus without their consent. Joining Campus Countdown to break it down for us is Kentucky correspondent Katie Jefferson.
Thanks, Peter. The George Washington University's president, Mark S. Wrighton, admitted publicly that in the fall 2021 semester, they conducted a surveillance pilot program that tracked the locations secretly of both students and employees. The alleged purpose of this program was to collect data to create a database that would inform the university of the density of different campus facilities. Wrighton addressed the public in an apology email that read, I write to inform you of a data analytics pilot program that took place on the university campus during the fall 2021 semester, and to apologize on behalf of the university for failure to inform you in advance of commencing this project. In order to track students and employees, locational data was used for the program, which was tracked by Wi-Fi access points on the George Washington campus. In the statement, Wrighton admits, George Washington Information Technology did attach descriptors to the data, so it was not completely anonymized. The data was separated into groups, one of which was the gender of the individuals being tracked. The university continued to do this throughout the semester, but failed to notify those who were affected until afterwards, let alone obtain consent from those people before they began the program. The process of neglecting to inform the university's own students and employees that their location was being actively and continuously tracked is absolutely a violation of privacy. As a college student with a high tuition bill, I personally find it unnerving that the George Washington University administration felt comfortable enough to spend money on such a wasteful and invasive project like this with no real benefits for anyone. This also poses a concern for students as to what other unethical decisions university faculty may be making in regard to our education and our campus life without our knowledge or consent. Thanks, Peter. Back to you.
Thanks, Katie. And for our number one story of the week, white and male students in a Binghamton University sociology course will have to wait their turn to participate in class until minorities and women have engaged first. The policy is called progressive stacking, which prioritizes student ideas and interactions based on the participants' race and gender. According to the syllabus, quote, if you are white, male, or someone privileged by the racial and gender structures of our society to have your voice easily voiced or heard, we will often ask you to hold off on your questions or comments to give others priority, and we'll come back to you a bit later or at another time. So without knowing anything about your personal life experiences, this professor assumes you are privileged based on your race and your sex, and bars students from participating based on those very factors. Can you imagine for a second what would happen if this syllabus said women and minorities should wait for white men to participate before engaging in the course? It would be rightfully deemed racist and sexist, but discrimination like this gets swept under the rug routinely. Worse yet, the syllabus quotes communist dictator Mao Zedong as the inspiration for this policy, the same Mao Zedong responsible for 45 million deaths, making him the biggest mass murderer in the history of the world, according to the Washington Post. The policy is based on Mao's quote, no investigation, no right to speak, in which the professor of the course explains, helps to convey the idea that speaking during class discussions should be based on having done your investigative work. This glorification of a communist mass murderer follows a growing trend of universities and professors praising and defending socialist dictators. Campus Reform previously reported on an incident at Penn State University where they put up a big Fidel Castro quote on the wall of their multicultural center. Thankfully, after Campus Reform reported on it and victims of socialism spoke out about it, the school removed the quote. And speaking of radical leftists, that leads us to our woke tweet of the week, written by Nicole Hannah-Jones of the 1619 Project. Did you have Al Sharpton being called out for racism on your 2022 bingo card? With Nicole Hannah-Jones, anything is possible. Sharpton joined MSNBC to talk about the rampant robberies taking place in New York City, pointing out how it's gotten so crazy that pharmacies are locking things up like toothbrushes these days. He said, and I quote, there are those concerned, including me, about overloading the system and the jails with petty crime. But at the same time, you cannot have a culture where people are just, at random, just robbing and stealing. This sparked outrage from the left on Twitter, with Jones responding, this drumbeat for continued mass incarceration is really horrific to watch. A person stealing steak is not national news, and there have always been thefts from stores. This is how you legitimize the carceral state. You can't even talk about these massive crime waves brought about by democratic policies that protect criminals without having people like Nicole Hannah-Jones call it a drumbeat for continued mass incarceration. Through her statement, she's making this a racial issue, as mass incarceration is something racial justice initiatives seek to dismantle, and therefore making implied accusations of racism against Sharpton. She's further downplaying these crimes and pressuring the media to not cover them, a common trend amongst leftist academics, and they've been quite successful in many cases. For example, we've seen institutions like the Bay Area Rapid Transit stop issuing press statements about criminal incidents or releasing surveillance videos of crimes committed in an effort to prevent racial bias in the public. Of course, Sharpton wasn't advocating for mass incarceration here, but leftists will eat their own for the sake of making a point. But if there is a crime problem in New York City, the solution is not to ignore or downplay it. But in leftist academia, commonsensical statements like that are deemed racist and unacceptable. Well, that's all we have for you today. If you're watching on YouTube, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Check out our social media platforms and campusreform.org for all the latest liberal lunacy being pushed on campus.